Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. So what I'm going to do now is to, this is a joint work which actually started as a joint work, but then later my co-author had got busy. So Pulkit helped me with a lot of data work for this paper. And apart from Pulkit, there were a couple of anonymous referees and my director who has also helped me in shaping up the paper to reduce the errors which were there earlier. So what I'm going to do is to talk on informing the developed India agenda, and use an input-output analysis to do that. The motivation that I draw for this paper is that the government of India has been exhorting people to make in India, make for India, start up India, invest India, kind of things. And then it came up with the production linked incentive scheme sometime in 21-22. A budget was allocated about close to 2 trillion rupees. And there is some incentive which has been disbursed. The idea was to raise production or output by a certain level, and but that is not what my motivation is for this paper. My motivation is that the scheme targeted 14 what they say key sectors or manufacturing industries. So I wanted to understand how they arrived at these key sectors, what went behind determining them. And that these key sectors were based on potential for revenue and employment generation. So perhaps there were multiplier effects of these key industries also. And then they said that this will have some cascading effect on the micro, small and medium enterprises. And when I tried to dig for some background work which would have been done to identify these key industries or to suggest on multiplier effects, I didn't find any. So I thought I might as well try to use what is available in literature to actually try and identify the key sectors for the Indian economy and to actually assess some multipliers from there. So what I do is I use an industry by industry input-output transactions table. The way the data is actually provided by the government, earlier the Indian we used to get input-output transactions table every 5 years. The first one was brought out in 68-69. And the last input-output table which the government brought out was in for 2007-8, sometime in the year 2013. And after that, now in the last few years, we have stopped actually publishing the input-output tables. But what the government gives is supply and use tables. So from those supply and use tables, after some algebraic manipulation, I can arrive at an industry by industry transactions table or a product by product transactions table. The supply use tables are now provided at 140 products and 66 industries classification. So that is the background. Grant me that I would have done the manipulation with the supply use tables properly to arrive at the what is called an industry by industry input output transactions table. So this is how it looks like. So if you look at the table, it gives you along a row, say along the row, it is the output of a particular industry which is going into that itself or into other industries. So you'll have an intermediate use along the row, and then there will be a final use, which is the final F. And then the sum of intermediate use and the final use gives you the total output that is along the row. The same thing you can get along the column also, like what is the input which a particular sector is drawing from all other sectors. So you add up those inputs which are going there, and then you add the factor inputs, which is the gross value added, and you will get again the total value of the output from that industry. So this is the, so both the column total and the row total are x1 or x2, x3, they balance. The final use table is actually again a matrix. It has private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, change in stock, and net exports. So like export minus import. And the gross value added is also a matrix. It has components like production and production taxes less subsidies, compensation to employees, and depreciation and operating surplus. So those are the things which are there in this. Grant me that this is how we summarize it, and that this is, I have done this all properly. All the values are in, all the transactions are in value terms, which means that they are a product of quantity into price. We don't know the quantity into price, but the way to look at it is when you normalize it by using the totals, you arrive at, you, for every, the normalization is done by the totals, then 1 rupee, one rupee worth of, say, agricultural output, 1 rupee worth of industrial output, 1 rupee worth of service output. That is what your interpretation is. How much of it, 1 rupee of industry would constitute of how many paisa worth of agriculture, how many paisa, and similarly in the input side. So that is the way to interpret this. When you do that, the output or quantity relations, which is along the row, will look like this, that the X, which is the total output, is a product of the intermediate transactions, intermediate coefficients, plus the final use. So X is I minus A inverse F. That is, grant me that this is, the algebra is what it is, and this is how, so along the column, it will look like this. I'm using P prime here as a price, but actually P prime is the same as X. It's only to distinguish between the output and the prices, or the quantity and the price part. So this is how it looks like. Okay. So these are the quantity and price relations from and for that follow from an input output table. Grant me that I'm doing this all right. Then how do you arrive at what the output multipliers? The output multipliers are, for an industry, J is defined as the total value of production in all industries of the economy that is necessary for all stages of production in order to produce 1 unit product, J for final use. Okay, so how do I find this from the input output table? From the input output table, you please recall that equation which I said, X is equal to I minus A inverse S, F, which is the output vector. If you break it, you have an X1, X2, X3, and this Z matrix with Z elements are the elements of the I minus A inverse. Okay. If you break it down further, then X1, X2, X3 will be as they are shown there. So what is, so del X by del Fj, suppose J is 2, the partial derivative of X with respect to partial derivative of X with respect to industry is the sum of elements of the second column of the Leontief inverse matrix. How does this come? And then the output multiplier will be given by Z12 plus Z22 plus Z32. That is the output multiplier for the industry sector. How is that coming? This is shown here. Is that making sense? That you need to do a partial derivative of the output based on a particular sector, how much of the input from that sector, then this is the partial derivative will give you, the sum of these will give you the output multiplier from that sector. Okay. So this is the output multiplier is the sum of the elements in the column in the I minus A inverse matrix. Okay. So this is how you arrive at the output multiplier. Similarly, you can also generate an income multiplier. The income multiplier in our case is what is the total income which is received by households and the direct and indirect requirement for wages. So because we are looking at households, we are looking only at the compensation of employees, and this is because the other elements in the gross value added actually include production taxes. So you can also have a revenue multiplier, you can also have a profit multiplier kind of thing. But I'm looking only at the income multiplier, which was through that income multiplier, you can assess that perhaps if the income is multiplying, which means it's also leading to more employment kind of thing. So this is also, you can look from here, like if you go there, then this income multiplier can be actually looked at from the gross value added. This gross value added actually has this compensation of employees and the production taxes less subsidies and the operating surplus. You can generate income multiplier, profit multiplier, or you can also generate a revenue multiplier. So the vector of income multiplier, grant me that I would have done it correctly. What I arrive at is, after I do this, is that you get this result. Output multipliers across the manufacturing or all the industries show up like this. Let me help you how to read this table. Say for the year 2011-12, what we find is that the manufacturing of beverages among the manufacturing sectors is the one with the lowest multiplier, which is 1.97, which means if you want to produce one additional unit for final use from the beverages sector, the total output which is generated in the economy is 1.97 rupees. And and that is the minimum multiplier among the manufacturing sectors. But the minimum multiplier, if you look at all the sectors, is 1.12, which is for some other sector. The ones which are shown in red are actually the ones which also have a link with are also also a part of the production linked incentive scheme. So those are shown in red, but don't worry with the red coloration for now. And those with the maximum multiplier, maximum output multiplier is actually seen for other manufacturing or for manufacturing of communication equipment. Out of these two, manufacturing of communication equipment is part of the PLI scheme. That's why it's been colored red. So amongst all industries, we find that the manufacturing sector has higher output multiplier as compared to the all other industries. And if you look at what is the weighted average of the multiplier, the weighted average of output multiplier for the manufacturing industries is about a third higher than the weighted average multiplier for all industries. So if you were to increase investment or output in the manufacturing sector, it is expected that it is going to have a larger multiplier effect for the economy, and that it would be, and that is also one of the targets for the government is thinking that it should try and raise it to about 25%. So when that is done, the government was also hoping that it would lead to more income generation, and then it will have an income multiplier and an employment effect also. But what we see from the next table is slightly different. This is only to highlight that there are only two sectors which have which show up as the highest multipliers in the list of 66 industries. The income multiplier also similarly, you read the table similarly. The red color ones are the ones which have a link with the production linked incentive scheme. But the lowest income multiplier is seen for manufacture of dairy products within the in the manufacturing sector, and the highest income multiplier would be for these are the sectors over years which show up as the highest income multiplier among the manufacturing. And but if you look at this column 5, you'll find that the income multiplier of the manufacturing sector is significantly lower than the income multiplier across all industries, which means that the manufacturing sector is perhaps more capital intensive. It is not generating as much income as one would have thought. Its output multiplier is far higher than for the all industries, but its income multiplier is significantly less than that for all industries. So, and that is something which should actually be troubling for us. And the highest increase, actually, the highest income multiplier is actually observed for those which are in the public sector, like public administration and defense. And the lowest income multiplier is actually is for ownership of dwellings amongst across all industries. So this is how it looks like as far as the multipliers go. And if you look at the correlation between the output multiplier and the income multiplier, we find that in the manufacturing industries, the correlation between output and income multiplier is moderate and positive across the manufacturing industries, but it is negative and weak across all industries. But this is when you look at the industries separately. If you were to take a look at the weighted average multiplier, which is the weighted average multiplier across the all industries together, then what happens is it's actually that weighted average multiplier is moderately weak for the manufacturing sectors, and it is moderate for across all industries, but in both the cases it is negative. What it says is that the relationship between output multiplier and the income multiplier is moving in different direction, is moving opposite to one another, and that is what uh, comes out of this analysis of the input-output tables. We also have an algebra for linkages. Grant me that I have done it's actually very simple. I'll show you what it does actually is, it actually looks at, so you have this I minus a inverse matrix, and these are the elements. So if what the linkage says, how do you draw a linkage? You look at what is the average level of this requirement from a particular industry. If the average is more than the overall average, then it has a backward linkage. If you move along the column, it has a backward linkage. If you move along the row, if it is greater than the average, then it is you have a stronger forward linkage, and that is what the algebra is. One is that you can look at whether it is more than the average is higher, average strength of the relationship is higher. The other is you can look at how uniform is that strength, or how it is distributed across all sectors. The more uniform or the lesser distributed it is, the more stronger is the relation. And if it is both forward and backward linked, then it can be called a key sector. So this is how a key sector, when you distinguish the linkages, you find that this is how they look like. Suppose you are looking at sectors which are forward linked. So like agriculture and livestock are strongly forward linked sectors. What are shown in bold are actually those which are showing up as strongly forward linked in all the years. There is 11 years data. So what is in bold means agriculture has strong forward linkages in all the 11 years that we have considered. But say forestry and logging shows as strong forward linkages only in 8 years. Coal and lignite will have strong forward linkages, and like that. If you look at the key sectors, it is like this. Then if you look at, say, number 22, which is this is the SUT code, the manufacture of fabricated metal products. It is one of those sectors which are also there in the PLI scheme, and this is a key sector in all the years. Okay, so it has strong forward and backward linkages in all the. So this is the way I have actually separated these or put them into different categories of linkages. So what we do is, so this is how one can arrive at whether these sectors have strong linkages or whether they have strong multipliers. And what we find is that in the case of manufacturing sector, he is he is. So this as far as the summary of my findings is that the correlation between output and income multipliers across the set of manufacturing industries is moderate and positive. But when you consider all industries, it is weak and negative. So this is only to go back to that table, which shows that this is moderate and positive, and this is negative and weak across all set of all industries. Okay. But the output multiplier for the group of manufacturing industries as a whole, when you take a weighted, because see the way the input output tables are organized, there can be an industry which is only 0.001% of the whole output, and there can be another industry which is almost 16-17% of the output. So to arrive at sense, to make a sense of it, we need to do some weighted average. So the output multiplier for the group of manufacturing industries is about 1/3 higher than that for all industries. The income multiplier for the group of manufacturing industries is about 2/3 of that for all industries. So income multiplier is lower than that for all industries. And the correlation, whether for the manufacturing group or for all these industries together, is negative. In the case of manufacturing, it is weakly negative. In the case of all industries together, it is moderately negative. So this is that brings me to the conclusion that casual twinning of the objectives for growth in output and income appears misplaced. So we must be careful, because we think that if we grow the output, we'll also grow employment opportunity or income opportunity, and that is not happening as far as labor is concerned. So that is what I wanted to draw from here. And whether I can I have not done that in the presentation, whether one can predict how the PLI scheme would go, whether it will actually lead to income generation or employment generation or not. But definitely the PLI scheme actually tells you that how much incentive people would be able to draw depending on certain criteria. And we can explain the outcome to a significant extent. What is the outcome that we are seeing in the PLI scheme? That perhaps can be explained by using this linkages and the multipliers, and whether that this technique can be used to filter up to actually focus and find more targeted sectors for intervention. That is also a possibility. It requires more information and more inputs or more granular information, and but that this is something which can be useful as far as I think. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Mukesh. Sanjib, are you ready?
Thank you, NIPFP, for inviting me to be discussant. It's a nice paper, Mukesh. I must congratulate you. Extremely hard work. This is only IO paper I have seen where you have done a longitudinal coverage, but 10-year period. I don't think I have seen any paper like that earlier. Only thing that now I think more SUD table of 23 and 24 has come out, so we have to have 2 more years to do the analysis complete. And the negative correlation between output and income multipliers in table 6 is generally important findings, and the paper is candid that pursuing output growth may not deliver the commensurate employment income. But you have not done the employment multiplier in the paper. That I think would be complete.
Yes, actually, employment multiplier is the employment. Those numbers, to map them onto the sectors,
Okay,
is another exercise, and it's not easy to do that.
okay.
That is why that's why I actually restricted to the income multiplier.
Okay.
I can do the revenue multiplier part, but the employment multiplier with those sectors, with that sector classification, is a tricky job.
Yeah, okay. I mean, these are very nice things, but there is something which I want to stress out in the paper. The paper has used industry technology assumption underlying the SU2 to IoT transformation. There are other approaches there with the commodity technology assumptions, which is generally preferred in the literature because it avoids the possibility of negative coefficients and better captures substitutions. The paper knows these choices but does not justify it empirically or test sensitivity to the alternative. The linkage classification is the most prevalent threshold, UL greater than or UL UK greater than 1 to the empirical throughout the empirical discussion. The paper acknowledges sharper thresholds are possible but never applies them, leaving the reader unable to distinguish genuinely strong key sector from marginal ones. This may be more better if you can do just one or more. Secondly, since you are talking about the income multiplier only of type 1, since you're looking at the OS, you should probably do the type 2 multiplier. It's not difficult to do it because that type 2 multiplier can usually are bigger than the type 1 multiplier. So employment effect may be more pronounced maybe, or income effect be more pronounced in that. See the most recent SUV table used is 21-22, and there are structure and disruption of COVID-19 2021, 2021, and there are GST transition documented in the post-70 probably a sensitivity analysis, excluding these 2 years, probably strengthening the findings. For identifying forward linkages, I find the paper has not used the Gauss inverse. The only contribution in the IO literature by an Indian is a Gauss. And Gauss inverse is a standard way to do the forward linkages. I don't know why the hotel has not used the Gauss inverse in this. That will be more add to the evaluative paper. Secondly, another thing is that many of the PRP sectors have low, strong import linkages. So ideally, what you should do is probably you calculate a domestic IO matrix, which is possible to do it, and see the impact on this multiplier linkage on that. That will be more complete to the picture, because then the leakage part of the import part will be taken out. That is another suggestion. I think another thing probably, I think in your appendix C write-up, probably you need to modify it. Probably you have done it, but in not mentioned. Probably that SUD table are given you 2 prices. One is basic price, another is a producer prices. Before you make the MJB transformation, most these metrics should be converted to one uniform prices before doing it. But you have not mentioned in the write-up their research. That should be done basically. Otherwise, it's a good paper, I would say. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Bharat.
So, congratulations on a very good paper and long time series. As Dr. Pohit said, something not been seen before. But I've just one quick question. You were trying to identify the important sectors and what are important. So yes, one is IO methodology, but couldn't you have used comparative advantage over the years, computed comparative advantage over the years to see whether India actually has a comparative advantage in these sectors, or is it evolving or not evolving over time? Wouldn't that have been a slightly simpler method to use it, or a complementary method? That's one suggestion. And the second suggestion is that the comparative advantage method, and the second one is sorry, I forgot the second suggestion. The comparative advantage is what I'm talking about.
Can I answer?
Okay, sir. The second one, like the manufacturing of computing communications, that's in that sector. I mean, all the manufacturing sectors, one could even complement by computing the GVO and the GVA from ASI and now ASUS sectors. So see the difference between GVO and GVA. So I happen to have done some work on manufacturing of communication equipment 2630. And we find that the GVO and GVA are different. GVO is much higher than GVA because the value addition is actually quite low. So I think that inference is very important to make also, and then correlate with your multipliers as we think about it. Thank you.
I'll respond to Professor Bhandari's question first. Actually, the comparative advantage I have not calculated, but one can, what I had looked at is what is the importable level, whether the sector is importable or exportable. I do draw a line of what is the share of imports. I don't explicitly calculate that, but to be able to comment on whether a sector should be advanced or should be restrained, I can, for the analysis, for any suggestion, it will actually look at what is its trade status. And the gross, what you said about the gross value, that definitely that would be a higher thing, and that can be seen easily. What Professor Pohit was saying, the Ghosh approach, actually I have, and if you see, sir, in the paper, I have given an output linkage approach also. But I have not talked about it either in the presentation or in the paper, because I thought readers might get, or the presentation would prolong and listeners would get more confused. But I have output approach, which I call the quantity or the output approach. It is there in the paper to look at the linkages, and one can calculate the multipliers also from there. So, yeah, commodity technology assumption that can be done, but the way the information is available, I think it to actually convert it, it may be slightly tricky to get a balanced IO from there. I have actually the balancing is done based on the basic prices first, and then I do that. So that has been taken care of, but it may not, I may have missed writing. Yeah, I have not mentioned that. Uh,
So previously, we used to have input-output tables that were available say, once in 10 years or so. The last available was some 2006-7. Now we have SUTs. We can construct IOs almost on a yearly basis. Is it really relevant that sense that you see input-output coefficients changing that fast on a yearly basis, or is it still possible to use, let's say, 2 periods of IO and then? Because every year, if we have input-output coefficients, I don't know how that helps in analysis in that sense. Maybe we can use just 2 points to say that these are still stable IO coefficients. Maybe your suggestion or
that's right. Actually, why the whole reason was to look at its stability, and there are sectors actually which show up as, say, with an importable status in a particular year, it can have an exportable status in the earlier year, and that changes. Those changes are, all of them are a result of the mix of policies that we have. So to be able to say things very confidently that we place our bet on this particular sector, we need to actually take in much more information. And this can actually be a starting point to filter up which are the focus which you can actually think of, and then from within those broad sectors, try and identify a few set of products within that category of industries. So that is what but the purpose of doing it over the years is to look for stability in the linkages, the stability in their multiplier numbers, and those things are coming out. And there are, and as Professor Pohit also pointed out, that I'm using a very liberal condition to say that this is a key sector, which is I'm just, if it is more than the average, but I can always make it stringent. It would have I can make that condition stringent. And same is true with choice of whether of the trade status. I can make means I am using a particular average value. If it is above that value, I'm calling it an importable or an exportable. But I can always make those conditions stringent. Those are more researcher dependent than the data. But those things are possible to do. Yes.
Just to add a little bit, specifically answer your question. The input-output tables are a planning tool. The SUT is a statistical tool, right? When planning ended, there was no utility in putting out IoTs. So the SUT came in as a replacement. Now the kind of work that is being done is actually planning. You're going back and asking the question, where do I focus? It's a planning question, right? So the fact that you can move, the important issue is that you can move seamlessly between the SUTs and the IoTs, and that there is consistency is the important finding. Because otherwise you can't use it for the purpose you want to. Any more?
I have a question. One of the tables, what you have shown is that there is a almost consistent negative correlation with income from 2011-12 right till last 22-23. I think you have used that data. So it reflects that there is something wrong with the policies which we have followed so far. So what do you think could be some of the drivers for this negative correlation? Because in the output side, you have positives coming out, at least for several sectors and on a regular basis over the years. So there's a mismatch. So jobless growth,
Yes, sir.
something like that.
Yes, this is in a sense explains the jobless growth phenomenon which we see. And sir, compensation to employees is one component of the gross value added. The gross value added has operating surplus and production taxes, less subsidies, and the cost of and depreciation also. And you'll find that the operating surplus or the that part is actually has a higher multiplier, and which actually tells us bluntly that we have a capital intensive technologies across all sectors. It's not and across all industries. It's not just a few things which we consider like electronics or computers and peripherals, and this is actually also an outcome of the crazy mix of policies that we have, including when I say that, see, you have the taxation policy, which taxes capital income at a lower rate, and which or the interest costs are more controlled than the wages. So the cost of wage cost to the cost of a capital, those ratios are perhaps not aligned with our resource endowments, and that is causing this perverse result which you are getting. And because both the wage rate, say, in the public sector is very high, and in the interests which are actually controlled are kept very low. So those are things which are actually driving some of these results, to my mind. And this has been done over decades. I mean, that the corporate income tax is lower. So there'll be a tendency to push more value addition onto capital or onto the operations.
Well, thank you. I think it's done. And thank you, everybody.